Here we go. We got no Clapper. We got no John, but we got a daggone handsome guy in front of us right now with a beautiful backdrop in New York City. Tell us a little bit. What are you doing there, Marc? Marc LoPresti.
Good to see you, Pete. As always, it's great to see the absolutely incredible Rebel Nation. I am joining you live from Midtown Manhattan, a gray and slightly overcast day, but it's warm. It's in the 50s, so we've got that going for us. And I am a keynote speaker at a two-day event run by the 361 firm. It's a family office group, and we have gathered here some really remarkable allocators, single and multifamily offices, institutional VCs, pension funds, things like that. We're talking macro, we're talking markets, we're talking the outlook for the venture capital ecosystem in the wake of Silicon Valley Bank, and enjoying time spent with some really brilliant people.
That's awesome. I love it. I know that John enjoyed it as well, and he's flying, which is why he's not here right now. But we're lucky we got Marc, because these guys, I got to tell you something. I've never seen two guys who travel more in my entire life. I mean, at any moment you could be in LA, Miami, Puerto Rico, New York, Boston, whatever, Chicago. And meanwhile, I'm down here, it sucks. I got to sit down here in Florida where it's about 85 and sunny. I mean, it's just terrible. But anyway.
I don't know about that, Pete. Nobody's buying that, but okay, no problem.
We're going to jump to the macro minute, and we're going to kick it off right now because it is what we consider to be something that is important, but we can cover it very rapidly. And I know you guys probably did as well, because you have to narrow down what it really means, because it's great to just talk about it. But you know what? What does it really mean? So I'm going to give you one. How about the new housing numbers? Now, some of those numbers were very, very interesting because they didn't expect them to be very good. Matter of fact, they expected to be negative, turned out to be positive. There are things going on within the economy that people are not necessarily, they're actually just looking past some of these things. And yet we're seeing a nice move there. With that, you're seeing many of the builders moving big time to the upside today. That's my macro. What do you got, Marc?
Well, that headline number is a little bit deceiving, Pete, because the other thing, the subtext of that print, right, was the fact that the median price for an existing home in this country dropped for the first time in 121 months. That's over a decade for those of you that are counting. So it's not so simple, and there's a lot to unpack. I'm not jumping in the home builders just yet.
Right. I wouldn't be either. I think there's a lot of hoops that they've got to go through, but that's the way it is. How about some fantastic futures? Now, I'm going to hit real quick, and then I know Marc's got something there. Gold. Gold has been absolutely on fire, and a lot of people aren't really paying attention to it because there's so many other things. I get it. But if you take your eyes and take a look at what gold has done recently, including getting back up there towards that 2000 level, but very, very close right now. The CME, they've got volume out the wazoo. I can tell you that we're seeing a lot going in a lot of different things. We focused on nat gas the other day. Today, it's about gold. What do you got, Marc?
Yeah, I got silver, Pete. So listen, contrary to what a lot of people believe, history, and I got to attribute this to our friend Larry McDonald, the great hedge fund manager that was on our Bulls, Bears, and Blockchain show just the other day on Monday's show, I believe, talking about a trend that you can count on. If you look historically over time, when the Fed finally hits the brakes, when the Fed finally gets to a point where hiking rates is no longer an option because either they've broken something or they've gotten inflation reined in, silver and other commodities as well as gold tend to perform. We, at that suggestion, we did a little research. John and I, we put two bets on that have paid off incredibly well. One, we bought the iShares Silver Trust on Monday. That trades up 27%. I looked before we went on air. And then yesterday we caught Heckler Mining. We bought the May 5 calls, the stock at about $5.90. That trades up almost 20% today. So, you got to look to those historical patterns in the market. They tend to repeat themselves. We're loving both of those trades in silver and gold.
And I'll tell you, McDonald is an awesome dude, man. That guy, and it's great that you had the opportunity to catch him at the right time.
Yeah.
There is something to be said for good timing, and that was great timing, actually.
That's
all right, so we're going to jump into our 4 market ticks. We got a lot going on here. We're going to hit it right away with square or block, however you want to do it. But there's a lot going on here with Dorsey. And I'll tell you what, Hindenburg is hitting it once again. Although I will say this, and I'm going to let you take it from there because you know far more about this, Marc, than I do, because you have that legal background, and so you're going to understand. But These guys we're talking about the short side and all the different problems that are going on there. And Dorsey, he sold the top, and suddenly it looks like this thing's hitting a low. But it's bounced today too. It got all the way down to 56, and now it's sitting at 63. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what's going on and how dangerous or not this might be right now.
Well, listen, the aptly named Hindenburg research concluding an almost 2-year investigation into the business practices of Square, right? And basically concluding and alleging that there is essentially no compliance in place at the company, that it is entirely driven by a desire to get the maximum number of accounts onto the platform. And knowing who these customers are would be a nice to have, not a need to have, which of course is not the case in the banking system. Some serious allegations of fraud and outright criminal activity. Allegations, of course, Pete, none of this has been proven. Jack Dorsey, obviously a very successful entrepreneur, and this space that they're in, dominated also by competition like PayPal and others. Very, very important. Providing services for the underbanked and or the unbanked. We're going to see how this thing plays out. But when Hindenburg takes a hit piece, and there are certainly other companies like that know what this feels like. When Hindenburg puts out a hit piece that is this salacious, you got to expect double digits to the downside. Pre-market 15% just before we went on air, as you said, down around 11. And I think still some room to go, notwithstanding coming off the day's lows.
Well, we're going to stick with something in the same sort of category now, Mark, because we're going to talk about Coinbase. Yeah. And that's another one. The headlines are out there. The Wells notice is out there. That's where I want to focus on, and that's where you come in again because of all your background and everything else. Because a lot of people hear that, they don't understand, well, what the hell is a Wells notice? What does this really mean? And quite honestly, a guy like me can kind of fudge my way through it. But you, with your legal background, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I will say this. A lot of this is preliminary, but there are a couple groups out there. I got Jefferies and KeyBank saying, hey, look, our level of concern surrounding Coinbase is getting pretty high. So you tell us, should it be high? And what's going on with Coinbase right now? It's down 16 or 15%, I think.
It should be high, Pete, unfortunately, because what we have is now a patently obvious attack on the cryptocurrency industry, a coordinated attack between Treasury, the SEC, the CFTC. A Wells notice, to answer that question, is essentially a letter the SEC sends to an individual or a corporation saying, we intend to bring an enforcement action against you. This is what it relates to. What do you have to say for yourself? Sort of similar to that invitation from Alan Bragg to Donald Trump. Come before the grand jury and tell us your side of things, which Trump, of course, rightly said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm staying in Florida. The unique thing here, the troubling thing here, and by the way, we're doing a special on this on Bulls, Bears, and Blockchain at 5:30 today because it's so controversial, is that the SEC did not, contrary to what Wells notice is supposed to do, provide any real specificity with respect to the alleged breach of regulation. Right. Coinbase coming out strong, the CEO saying, hey, this does not impact our operations. We're not changing anything that we do. We're disappointed that the SEC decided to issue this letter without the requisite particularity, but the stock getting hit hard. And I think rightfully so. I think the SEC did not act appropriately with this Wells notice without giving that specificity. But you got to understand the regulatory concern, especially after Signature Bank getting taken out behind the woodshed and shot in the head, in part because of its crypto business. If you don't believe that, I got a bridge not too far from here that I'd like to tell you.
I'd also say Silvergate. I'd also add, there's a whole bunch of them that have had exposure, and that's a scary thing as well. Yeah. Next, we're going to jump on is CHWY. Now, we're going to answer this question in a second, but CHWY came out. They had great earnings. They had great revenue. Everything looks pretty good. So you're asked the question, well, why is the stock going lower? I can tell you that. The active users are starting to lower, and that's becoming a problem because, of course, there's all kinds of metrics everybody uses for every company that's out there. This, if you don't know what CHWY is, it's e-commerce pet food. But we also have Deutsche Bank coming out and saying, you know what, we had a buy on this. I think we're going to move to a hold. We're a little bit concerned about these numbers. So despite the fact that they had a very impressive earnings report, It's some of the detail within that there where people are saying, you know what, I'm going to back off a little bit. Stock was down 4 or 5%, something like that. Nothing huge, nothing like we were just talking about, but it's getting hit today. What do you think about this one?
Well, I mean, does Deutsche Bank just hate puppies? Like, what's going on there? This is CHWY, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Look, this is one of those important lessons for investors that just because a company meets or beats the street's expectations, as they did here, both in terms of earnings per share and the top line revenue numbers, it doesn't necessarily mean the stock's going to perform well. You got to listen to the guidance. When the guidance is as sanguine as the guidance from CHWY CEO with this report coming out, you're going to see pressure on the stock. The other thing the CEO talked about, Pete, that I want to mention is they have international plans to expand the CHWY's base internationally. It's going to cost money. It's going to put pressure on their profit margin. Another reason the stock's trading to the downside. Before we went on air, the stock was trading 35.04, down about 7%.
Ooh, it slipped a little bit more. Wow.
Yes,
All right. Well, next we're going to hit Worthington. Now, it's not a name that everybody knows, obviously, but it's in the steel world. They've got a lot of different areas in which they absolutely service. Multiple insiders not that terribly long ago were buying stock here, Mark. Now, that's not illegal. It's not anything. There are people out there. That's what we like to see, quite honestly. I like when I see guys in the C-suite that are going out and saying, hey, you know what? I want to increase because I think that the markets don't understand what's going on here. Well, clearly the markets didn't understand because that stock is having an absolutely phenomenal day today. And some of the numbers that they put up, when I look at the earnings, great. I look at the margins, fantastic. I look at the volumes. There is some issues here and there, but overall, this report was very, very strong, and the stock is definitely reflecting that right now.
Yeah, no doubt. A 52-week high today, 62.80, up 18% and change just before we went live with the show. The other thing that's interesting to me from these numbers, Pete, is the commentary from the C-suite of Worthington basically saying pressure, downside pressure, demand destruction, as we like to call it, in steel has come to an end, and they are seeing now the cycle start to reverse. That's a pretty major indication of what industrial manufacturing and global demand for steel looks like. That's a good indicator amidst a sea of what one could argue pretty readily that we've had a lot of negative indicators in terms of what's on tap for GDP growth, consumer demand and spending in the wake of what's happened with the banking crisis and interest rates, the gloom and doom. Great news out of Worthington, new 52-week high. Love to see something like that. Love to see that insider buying. Yeah. Watch that, folks. If they're buying or selling, Silicon Valley Bank, if they're buying or selling, it tells you a lot.
You're right. And we've already talked about a couple of stocks where there was some selling. And in this case, we had some buying. And these guys know their companies. So, yeah, pretty interesting. We're going to hit some unusual options activity now. I'm going to start it off. I'm going to let Mark after me, but I'm going to give you NU Holdings. Now, this is a Brazilian bank. They're digital financial. It's interesting. We don't talk about it hardly ever just because it doesn't pop up all that often, but it did pop up today with a buyer of 21,000 of the May. So they're actually buying time. You know, Mark, everything that we see generally has been very, very short term. I'm talking it might expire tomorrow or a week or 2 weeks. In this case, this is going all the way out to May. The May 4.5 calls, they paid 41 cents for 21,000 of these calls. So somebody wants to be in there. The stock is trading right beneath that level, and they hedge themselves a little bit. They're not going shooting for the stars, but they are shooting for upside. They actually sold the 5 strike calls. So in other words, they're buying something for 50 cents at best. They're paying about 20 cents. That's still very, very bullish. Somebody looking for this stock to make a nice move to the upside. Could it happen? Absolutely could. It is on the lower end of the 52-week range. Right. And I liked it enough that I actually did participate in this one as well.
Oh, nice. Well, you know, Pete, the only thing I have to add to this story with NU is they are in a similar type of business to that other company, Block and Square, that we just talked about. So is this a bet that declining market share, customers leaving that platform, in concerns about possible regulatory action? That Hindenburg report, by the way, also hinted at a possible SEC investigation, a FOIA report, Freedom of Information Act report, getting that out. So it could be what's bad for Block is good for NU. We'll see how that pans out. I've also got bullish option buying, and one of our favorites, one that I was a perennial bull, and then last year famously on Liz Clayman's show, perennial bear on Netflix. I turned bull on Liz's show in the beginning of the fourth quarter of last year. Netflix, these are also super, super short duration. Investors snapping up 5,300 of the March 24 expiring tomorrow, 320 calls at the same time, also buying a 4,500 lot of the March 24 expiring tomorrow, 315 calls, stock trading between when we just before going on around $314. So pretty close to the strike on that second call mentioned that I indicated a minute ago. But I'm still keeping my overall bullish outlook on Netflix. I think they're doing a pretty darn good job of getting at least an edge in the streaming wars, which continue unrelentless.
Yeah, it has been amazing. Absolutely amazing. And Netflix has stood up very nice and tall. I agree with you, Mark. All right, next, we're going to jump to some sports. I know you love getting into this, Mark, so we're going to talk about this a little bit. But here's the focus that I want for today. And it's always fun. You know, there's always a lot of different things. March Madness, that's where we are, right? We're at the Sweet 16. Everybody's talking about it. Games are tonight. So I thought it would be fun for us to just kind of discuss, is there any dark horses out there? Because it's been as madness this year, the madness level is as high as any year I've seen. And some of those early losses for those high seeds and all the rest of it, it makes it really, really interesting. The team that I like, and I'm probably biased, is Michigan State. And I'm a Big Ten guy. The entire Big Ten got knocked out almost week one. I mean, absolutely pathetic how the performance was. Purdue being the first one to go as a number one seed, they were out immediately, right? Very embarrassing. But I got to tell you, Izzo's one of those great coaches. I love what he's doing. He went up against a very, very good USC team. They beat them early on. Then they went up against number 2 ranked Marquette that a lot of people thought really could be a team that could threaten to be in the Final Four, maybe winning it, but at least in the Final Four. They took them out. Now they got Kansas State, and that's games tonight. I like Michigan State. I like the run they're on. They've beat whoever's in front of them, whether they're ranked a little bit lower or quite a bit higher. I think this is a 7 seed that's got an opportunity, Mark. So that's my dark horse. Do you have anybody in there?
Yeah, listen, I can't argue with that. And I got, the founder of this 360 organization whose conference I'm at now is a Michigan alum. He stacks his board and advisory board with Michigan guys. All I'm hearing about is the same call that you're making here in terms of their chances. So who am I to go against it? Go Blue.
Yeah, I hear you. I think Florida Atlantic is probably about done, but I think Creighton is another school that has an opportunity. They've gone up against some big hitters and continue to be there, so maybe they've got a little bit of fire that they've caught as well. Who knows? Now we're going to jump to Major League Baseball. So I'm not the huge, the monster baseball guy. I've never had the patience for it, but I've grown over the years to like it a little bit more. A lot of my buddies who played in it, now some of my buddies, their kids are part of it. They're in Major League. I just had one buddy whose son was pitching for the Oakland A's last year. He's a 6'7" guy who can throw around 100 and something miles an hour. Now he's playing with the Marlins, so we'll be keeping an eye on him. Last name is P-U-K, Puck. Great kid, great arm, fun kid to watch. But I'm looking at the Los Angeles Angels, Mark. I look at this team, and every year they seem to get more and more interesting. But Ohtani, is there anything like this guy? I mean, I've never seen anything like him in my life. And the closest thing that anybody can ever say is, well, maybe Babe Ruth. And that's pretty big shoes. But let's just run through this. Last year, he pitched a top for the team, 166 innings. Nobody's even close to him on that. And he was up for 586 times at the plate. I mean, on top of that, he had 34 home runs. He had 95 RBIs. The guy can pitch. The guy can hit. He can play in games. He doesn't care. He's like a guy who's 12 years old where he can play anywhere you want. Just let him play, and he's unbelievable. I love that, and I think because of that and because of him, this is a team that this year I think has a shot towards the end. What do you think?
Yeah, hard to disagree with that. Although for the time that I had a place in LA, I was a Dodgers fan and a Dodgers season ticket holder. So, when we talk about Los Angeles and California-based baseball teams, I got to stick with the Dodgers. But at the end of the day, I am a New Yorker at heart. So we like the Mets prospects. We'll see how that pans out.
Well, and our buddy Stevie Cohen is there, so we know that, and we love him to death. And he's not afraid to throw money at it.
No, sir.
I love him for that because you know what? Sometimes some of these teams are a little bit cheap and it doesn't work. Sometimes it works. Kansas City's been proof of that many times. Tampa's been proof of that many times. But oftentimes you do need to throw some money at people, and I'll tell you what, Stevie Cohen is not afraid to do that.
That's
Mark,
right.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. John, very last minute, of course, as usual, says, hey, I'm not able to do this today. But you know what? You're not just filling in. You're taking over. You're like Pip.
Oh, no. Don't say that. Pete, don't say that. No, I love doing it. I love addressing the incredible market rebellion, fan base, the Rebel Nation, as they call them. You got me anytime you need me, my friend.
Well, we appreciate it, Mark. Thanks a lot. And folks, we will see you not tomorrow. We'll see you on Monday for the next Rebel's Edge.
Have a great weekend.